Sorry about the tech difficulties there, everyone. Hopefully still listening, and this will be recorded and provided later on for people who may have dropped out of the transmission. So thank you so much for joining us for our Tocal Beekeeping Field Day, the 43rd Annual Beekeeping Field Day, the longest running field day in Australia. I'd like to welcome our presenters today. Thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Madeline Kratz from DPI. We have Emily Nordic from DPI. Danny Lafleur from ARBIC, colleague in Honeybee Education, and Darren Budworth from the Rural Assistance Authority. We haven't had all of our speakers be available to enter into our live Q&A, so please bear with us, and any questions that we've got for members that are not present, we will provide them later on out to our Eventbrite attendee list, and also through the recorded videos that we have posted after this on our Tocal College YouTube channel. Our first question was actually directed to Chris Anderson, who is not available to speak today. We do have some technical specialists and our ARBIC representative here that might be able to assist us with this answer. And the question is the original source of the incursion now known? And I would like to direct this question off to either Danny or Liz, if that's okay.
I might take this one. So Liz Frost, working for DPI as a technical specialist for bees, and at this stage the incursion is, the original source is not known. However, through genotyping it's been shown that it's been a single incursion, so the mites that have been tested are all related, and we know from the detection levels that there's a high density, as Chris mentioned in his presentation, highest density of mites around the Williamtown airport area. So that's about as much as we know at this stage. Danny, do you want to add to that?
Thanks, Liz. Thanks, Bianca. I know that genomic sequencing has been something of a problem for this response. So the mites were initially sequenced in the first few weeks of the incursion, but they've had a lot of issues because it is such a large genomic sequence, and getting quality of mites back to the labs to make sure they could get a really definitive and accurate diagnostic on it. What they have been able to determine is that it does not match the New Zealand genomic sequence. So we know for sure that it's not from New Zealand, but beyond that, there's not a lot of clarity. So the genomic sequencing isn't really matching anywhere else in the country with great certainty at this stage. And now they are on their 4th round of sequencing to try and make sure that they can determine that. So they're still working very hard towards that and that's in terms of its origin. So in terms of the point of entry, like Liz says, there's not a lot of certainty around that at this stage.
Okay, so my next question is for Danny, and it is, can red zone beekeepers get support from ARBIC? How should they do this?
Sure. So as I mentioned in our presentation, ARBIC is a not-for-profit representative body. Our main source of income or revenue into ARBIC is through our Friends of ARBIC model, which is a donation system basically that receives support from beekeepers and honey packers. So we don't have a large pool of revenue nor a large pool of reserves in place to be able to provide any sort of compensation to beekeepers. What we have done is worked with Rural Aid to reinstate the Hive Aid program that was in place during the bushfires. So that program is now up and running again. So Hive Aid is the best place to go. We've worked closely to get that up and going. It has received some donations from the public, but it also offers a large range of options for beekeepers to be able to access support through that as well. So unfortunately, ARBIC doesn't have the resources to do that directly, but through Rural Aid, we're endeavouring to try and provide some support.
That's great. Thank you, Danny. It's really important that our beekeepers' questions, I guess, are coming through, and the contact we need to make to ARBIC. Our next question comes down to Elizabeth Frost. Did the queens from the Plan B program survive the transfer from red to blue zones?
We had mixed results. So we tried to conserve 50 queens, and that involved about 5 different permits to get bees from the new worker attendants from the blue zone into the entomological facility at DPI to replace red zone attendants that were euthanized and each individually checked thoroughly by 2 entomologists. The queens were all assessed by 2 entomologists, and in the 2 weeks prior, I alcohol washed or used Baverol strips and sticky mats to monitor those high value queens' original hives for varroa mite. Didn't find any, and sent those sticky mats off to Orange Ag Institute for further identification. So I had a look at each of them very thoroughly, but then the entomologist also had a look at those. And of the 50 queens that were assessed, there are a mix of ages as well. So it was a bit of a risky procedure, I suppose. And with La Nina and all the challenges of the season, we've had some initial good success with introductions. So of the 50 queens, only at introduction 4 weren't accepted. So pretty good acceptance initially, but some of the breeder queens were a bit advanced in age. So I think last week a few more have been superseded. So it was worth doing, but that's I guess that's what it is at the moment.
Okay, that's tough. That's tough, Liz. I'll go over to Em. You've got the next question for the Rural Assistance Authority.
Yeah, so Darren, I think you're taking this one. It is, if people have made claims that have not been finalised, are the RAA putting extra staff out there to assist this process for quicker turnaround?
Thanks for the question, Emily. Look, RAA have this week sourced additional resources, both in response to the current measures, but also anticipation for future measures coming on board. So that is an absolute yes. We are looking at doing that, and we have put in measures to do so. This week, I think we've added additional resources, and we'll continue to monitor that situation to ensure that we maintain our 20-day KPI in terms of making sure assessments are finalised in that time period.
Awesome. Thank you, Darren. I'm just going to hand over to Kelly.
Okay, hi everybody. I've got a couple of questions for Madeline. The first one is there a list of plants, Australian native plants, that are high in protein?
Thanks, Kelly. So in general, I think this is obviously a very tricky question to answer because we've got such a large variety of floral resources out there, and each one of them is different. There's certainly some trends in different plant families as such. So for example, our daisies, which we know can be low in protein, but and individual pollens can also be missing certain nutrients. So that can be amino acids or can be fatty acids, different levels and so on. But I think depending on which area everyone is in that is looking to plant different species, I would actually recommend a book to you, and you might have seen it before. And this is our famous floral Bible. I'm not sure if you can see it, but I read it out. It's Honey and Pollen Flora of South Eastern Australia, written by Doug Somerville. And it is a great book because it actually gives you an idea of which species. You can look up the different species and see how good they are for bees, for honey or for nectar, as well as for pollen. And you can look where those species are also found and where you can grow them. But there's also lots of resources available online for planting. So another one is Bee Friendly, a planting guide for European honeybees and Australian native pollinators that you can look up online. But generally speaking, honeybees do want to, or they thrive on higher protein pollen. So if you've got anything that is above 25% or even greater, then that is optimal. And to some extent, honeybees can also compensate for different nutrients, but that assumes that a nutrient isn't very low or even deficient, so that they cannot compensate by consuming more of a specific pollen type, for example.
Great, thanks, Madeline. Got one more for you. So if you say fresh is best in terms of pollen supplement, how can beekeepers support brood production if they're more likely to seek it in the environment?
So generally speaking, it is the case. So if there is an abundance in nature, honeybees will go and collect that first. And I think as beekeepers, that's also what we want, because that means we do not have to provide supplements. And I think that is always the preferred option if they can actually get it. But if there is a shortage, then we can certainly supplementary feed and support the hives, whether that is for queen rearing or whether that is to maintain the bees through a shortage, or even to build them for example, a honey crop or pollination service. And depending, I think the key there is a few different things, and that is first, how are you, what reason are you actually feeding for? Second, how are you intending to feed? Like, are you going to feed the hives inside of the bees inside of the hive? So is it going to be open fed? What sort of environmental conditions do you have in your area, and how might that affect how easily the bees can consume one or the other inside or outside of the hive? So depending on what is short, we can definitely support the bees, whether that is through sugar feeding or pollen or protein supplements. But the key is to, I think in the end, is really to try it out in your area and try different methods and see what actually works best for you in the different scenarios.
Thanks, Madeline. And don't forget, Doug's book won the Apimondia Award for a contribution to scientific research and into honeybees. So go Doug, go DPI, and all the collaborators on that book. It's fantastic. I'd also like to, just next question, I think, Emily, you've got a question there for Emily Nordic as well.
Yes, so if bees do not feed the pollen substitute to larvae, why is it such a common practice in the US? What is the benefit?
Sure. Thanks, Emily. That's a really good question. I guess it wasn't known until recently that they're not feeding the pollen substitute patties directly to the larvae. But there's still a possibility that the nurse bees are eating these patties and using those nutrients to supply brood food, or the jelly. So that's kind of an indirect feeding to the larvae. So those nutrients still could be reaching the larvae. And, you know, we hypothesize that they do, just because we do see increases in brood stores when pollen is scarce and pollen substitutes are used to replace that natural pollen. So yeah, there's still a possibility it's working in some way. We just don't think that those patties are used exactly like natural pollen. But then there are a lot of other factors, and I think Madeline just touched on those really well. Beekeepers will use pollen substitutes when the bees are desperate, when there's pollen dearth and they really need to bulk up their bees for pollination events. So in the US, almond pollination is really, really huge, and it happens kind of early in the spring. It happens at a time when the bees don't necessarily have a lot of natural resources. So they'll use those pollen subs to kind of bulk them up ahead of time. So yeah, for bulking up, and also for just keeping the bees healthy in times of need. So there's still some potential benefits there. It's just probably not as good as natural pollen would be.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Emily Nordic, for that one. My next question goes out to Kelly. So are volunteers still required for the response? How can people continue to help with bee varroa eradication?
Yeah, look, we definitely still do need volunteers. We're looking at being wrapped up pretty soon. However, it would be great to have some more beekeepers on board for the destruction obviously for some people they might find that difficult because we are conducting eradication now rather than surveillance, but it would be great to have some more beekeepers assisting that. Obviously the more people we have come on board, the quicker we can actually complete that action and move on to the next phase of the program. However, there's a couple of other things that people can do. They can make sure that they report any feral nests that they notice around the place in trees and buildings and other places like that, and also potentially report any hives that they think may have gone unreported, because it'd be really great to wrap up all the managed hives side of the program before we move on.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been great. We've had lots and lots of support from all sorts of beekeepers from around Australia. But yeah, we definitely need the beekeepers that can give some time to wrap up this last part of the first, what was planned for, the 100 days, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah.
To get those beekeepers on the field to be able to get into those eradication teams and be successful. So yeah,
Yep.
that's really important.
Absolutely.
I guess the next question, yeah. And the next question is still really sort of focused on the response. And I guess this kind of might be an answer for Chris Anderson to provide us afterwards, but because you're here, Danny, and because Liz, as tech specialist for honeybees, I think I might just put this in here. And the question is, assuming the varroa mites are all contained and necessary hives destroyed, and suitable times given for surveillance, when would the movement ban end?
You want me to have a go at that, Liz? Yeah, so the movement ban, I assume we're talking about the movement ban in the purple zone, opposed to the blue zone, because at the moment bees can move around the blue zone. So the purple zone at the moment, they can move, but it's on an individual permit basis. So if people want to move the hives in the purple zone, they need to ring the hotline and go through that individual permit. They're not all approved. It's all individually assessed on risk. In terms of when that might lift, look, the purple zone is going to be here to stay for a little while. It's a critical part to the response and making sure that any escapees out of the red zone are captured in the purple zone. And so for the majority of the response, the purple zone will be in place. In terms of the restrictions there, it's really about the risk. So as they gain more and more confidence that the eradication is successful, the response team will be able to reassess the risks of the activities in the purple zone. That may allow some reduction of those restrictions, and it may not. But that's just something, it's really crystal ball gazing and something we don't know until we have all that data in place and all that surveillance information to be able, for the epidemiologists to be able to reassess those risks.
Great. Does anyone have more to add? No, Liz, come on, Liz. I guess I have a question. If Kelly, I'm not sure if you'll be able to provide, but we could put it in. Okay, I do have a random question come through to be able to provide where people can contact DPI. So I'm going to put that in our recorded version, and I'll repost that back on our Tocal Beekeepers Field Day page to how volunteers can actually contact the DPI to put their details down to assist if they would like to help in this the continuing phase of eradication. So thanks very much. Now, we actually have a little bit of time left, but we have not got many more questions for anyone at this stage. So I don't see any point in continuing, because it's going to be a long day for people having rewatched it back if they are watching it again. So thank you very much to everybody that's joined us this afternoon, and anyone who's listened live or post the event. Thanks so much to all my colleagues for fantastic work behind the scenes to put this all together, and especially to Natasha, who is a whiz in the digital space to get this to happen. So thanks very much.